I'm Sophie from the BIPC here in Cumbria, and today just happens to be National Startup Day across our BIPC network. So to help inspire all you business entrepreneurs, we're pleased to be hosting a series of informative webinars from some really engaging guest speakers. The first being from our friends Guy Huxtable and Daniel Heary from the Cumbria Social Enterprise Partnership, all about starting up a new social enterprise. So without further ado, let me pass you over to the real experts, Guy and Daniel.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Heary. I'm the Vice Chair of Cumbria Social Enterprise Partnership. Guy, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi, my name's Guy Huxtable. I'm from a company called Wingspan, and we've been working alongside Daniel for best part of 20 years, I think, to help social enterprises start up and develop and generally do the things that they want to do in Cumbria.
Brill. So we've got a few slides today we're going to run through just to give you a bit of background. What is a social enterprise? Why set one up? What are the advantages over a conventional business? What sort of social enterprises are there in Cumbria today? You probably know some of the names out there. And then we'll delve down into a bit of the detail around what a social enterprise actually looks like, what the legal form is, and then some information about advice and support following on from this. So, what is a social enterprise? There's a number of definitions that are out there, but basically it's around having, I suppose, social and environmental mission. So it's not just about making money, it's not just about the bottom line, and it's about having that baked into the governing documents for the business as well. It generally trades, which puts it on a different level to things like charities, which have really focused on their social objectives. So social enterprises are all around trading, and there's a rule of thumb that you generate half of your income through trading, but that's not fixed. The other one there is it's controlled or owned, and it's all about the social mission. It's what impact that the social enterprise is going to have. And when it makes a profit, hopefully at the end of the year, that profit gets reinvested in the social mission. It doesn't go on a new yacht for the directors or a trip to the Maldives for the office party. And that final one there, generally social enterprises are really transparent about how they operate. So they've got good governance, they've got a board of directors that makes decisions, which links back to the impact, and that's what they focus on. So why set up a social enterprise compared to doing it as a normal business? I suppose this gets down to the nub of it, and a lot of the people we work with around Cumbria, they generally want to do something. They want to start up a business, but there's a greater purpose behind it. So they see that in doing this, there's a wider social or environmental benefit that can be generated. And it's all about how they deliver that impact. And normal businesses, you set up as a sole trader, you're on your own, it's you against the world, and that's quite tough, it's quite lonely. But if you're working as a social enterprise, you may be working with some friends or other people who want to see the same impact in your community, or they share the same passion for a particular cause. So this gives a structure in which you can bring those other people in to take part in the governance of the enterprise. And when times get really tough in the first couple of years, which they always do, whatever business you set up, you can sit around the table in the pub, have a couple of drinks, and share that burden with other people, and that helps you barrel through and get over those things. And that's one of the reasons why social enterprises, they tend to outlast a lot of small sole traders, because people are committed to that cause, but they also have that resilience from being able to work with other people and share their problems, and through sharing their problems, come up with solutions and things that maybe would be missed if you're just trying to do something on your own. The third point there is around access to different finance. So quite often because social enterprises are working to deliver a real impact in the community, that's stuff that's quite attractive to funders who want to put grants in, or other people in the community who may want to invest in the business through community shares. You know, they're sharing that problem, they see that problem, it's really visible to them. You're going out there to solve it, people want to get on board and help with that. And the final one there, it's all around job satisfaction. So particularly in the pandemic, we saw a lot of people reevaluating their lives. You know, are they happy with the work that they're in? Could they be doing something else which gives them more job satisfaction and gives them that extra sense of purpose? And we see this at times of change like the pandemic. You know, a lot of social enterprises have been set up since then. Obviously, at the moment in Cumbria, we've got local government reorganisation as well, which is causing a lot of people just to reappraise what they want to do. And particularly for those people who are leaving the public sector, this social enterprises often make up a really nice sort of halfway house, because you get to keep the public sector values that you like, and the fact that you're doing stuff for the community, but you can also trade and do it in an entrepreneurial way as well. So it gives you that greater freedom and flexibility, but at the same time being able to do something good for a society. So we often get asked, you know, why is this, how is it different to a normal business or a charity? And I always tend to say we've got a sort of sliding scale here. We've got charities at one end, we've got conventional businesses at the other end, and both those, you know, that's a sliding scale. So you've got conventional businesses that do a huge amount of stuff in their community, and they sort of slide along that scale that way. And at the same time, you've got charities that are doing a lot of really entrepreneurial stuff, and they move along that scale. But with a charity, you're limited in terms of the amount of entrepreneurial activity that you can do. That, of course, they set up trading arms like shops and things like that, but that's more, yeah, it's more hassle. If you want to do something, it's you have to work your way around it. And as a conventional business, you don't, you know, you're saying that your prime objective is to make money. You can't recognize that in the business structure. Whereas with a social enterprise, people have got real visibility that you're trying to deliver social and environmental impacts for your customers, or if you're getting funders putting money in, then they can see what you're trying to do. And particularly if, you know, in Cumbria, we have a lot of social enterprises that work with the public sector, so they're delivering services, they're delivering contracts, because the private sector isn't stepping up to the same extent as it is in other areas. And this enables, you know, public sector to feel a greater level of comfort that the people they're dealing with, who they're giving the contracts to, share the same set of values that they have. So here's a few that big and small social enterprises around the county. If you've ever been in touch with a doctor outside of ours, then you'll have probably spoken to someone employed by CHOC, Cumbria Health on Call. They've been set up as a social enterprise for the past 15 years or so. So the profits get reinvested back into the business. Down in Barrow, a really long-running small social enterprise has been Signal Film and Media, which has developed a lot of training opportunities for young people and been involved in doing some great work around video, audio recording. GLL started off as Greenwich Leisure down in London. They operate swimming pools for various councils around and leisure centres around the county. So they're a huge social enterprise. They're nationwide. But if you've ever been for a swim, one of the pools, you know, the lifeguards looking over you, you're trusting your life with, they're the ones who are employed by GLL, and that's a social enterprise. And I put Charge My Street in there, which is a new social enterprise that I've been involved with setting up, putting in electric vehicle charging points. and we started that off in 2018. It's now the biggest network of public charging points in Cumbria, which shows that it doesn't have to be just the Shells or the BPs that are putting in this net zero infrastructure to transition us all away from our petrol cars. Social enterprises have got a really valuable role to play in decarbonising the county and that climate transition. So one of the things that helps to define a social enterprise is its companies is the legal structure. And one of the most popular forms is a company limited by guarantee. So this is means that you're limited to £1. So if everything goes wrong, you're not going to lose your house, all the other things that you would do if you had unlimited liability. And that liability is limited to £1. It gets incorporated with Companies House, and it's fairly simple to set one of these up. I think the pros of being a company limited by guarantee is it takes the legal responsibility off you. So the organisation is the one that shares the risk, and normally you'd have 2 or 3 other directors or on the board, maybe more with you, so that you're sharing that load of governance. The directors can be paid to carry out the duties. So if you see an issue in your town or your village, or you've got a great idea, you can go away, start that business up, and then get paid to deliver those services, to work in it. It gets a bit more complicated if you're trying to do that as a charity. You can also lease, own property, deliver contracts, that sort of stuff. I think because it's not as the governance isn't as strong as what's required for a charity, it can be harder to apply for funding. And particularly around Cumbria, some of the grant giving trusts aren't as keen on putting money into companies limited by guarantee because they feel the governance is a bit weaker. And it's this tension between, you want it to be entrepreneurial and easy to get going and be responsive, but at the same time, it has to have that accountability built into it. And there's always that tension whenever we're speaking to people about setting up new social enterprises. Got to send your accounts into Companies House every year, and you pay tax on those. If you've got stronger social objectives, then the other thing is a charitable incorporated organisation. I think I've missed a slide there. We should have one with pros as well. But essentially, your pros of being a charity are people tend to trust charities a lot more, but then you lose a bit of that flexibility in terms of being able to do creative trading. So you can trade, but it tends to be a lot stricter. And we were discussing this on a call last week. Charity that wanted to start selling teas and coffees, and they weren't allowed to do that because it was out with their objectives. And it was very it got down to some really tight details, which didn't really make sense to it. And I'm looking at common sense. You think, well, why are they doing that? But there is actually a logic to it, and you've got to be really aware of that logic when you're involved in trying to run a charity, so that you don't overstep the mark and fall out of favour with the Charity Commission. So with this, you send your reports into the Charity Commission every year. There can be really easy reports, or the bigger you get, they tend to ask for more information, more detail in the accounts. And then about 15 years ago, the government was really interested in how they could really boost the social enterprise sector, and they came up with a new category called community interest company, which is a sort of souped up company limited by guarantee, but it has what's called an asset lock in there, so that if a fund puts money into it, they know that that will stay for community benefit, and it stops you getting into situations where funding gets put into a social enterprise to buy assets, be they buildings or equipment, and then the directors say, well, actually, we're going to close it down and do a runner with all that, with those assets. So it gives everyone more comfort that it's actually being better run and there's more protection there for both customers, the people who invest in it, and also and the other sort of stakeholders. So I think the pros, it's widely become now seen as the main sort of go-to brand for social enterprise. People say, is it a CIC? Yes, sort of ticking the box. Happy with that. It has that level of get up and go where you can set the thing up, start trading to deliver some wider social purpose and get paid for it, which is really important. And it gives you that entrepreneurial freedom to go out and do different things, but while protecting individual directors. Both the cons of community interest company, there's a bit more paperwork to do because you've got to put stuff into the CIC regulator as well, which is it's not a big deal, but it's, if you dislike paperwork as much as I do, then it can be a bit of a pain. There's a few tax exemptions that they can't do, and as I mentioned earlier, even though it's a recognised brand, certain charitable grant giving organisations, it doesn't meet their sort of gold standard as what a good organisation that they'd want to give their money to is. So those are the main ones. Other ones which we regularly work with and help people to set up are cooperative societies. So this could be a members co-op where you've got a number of people come together to buy a service or goods, and then they can bulk buy and then pass on the savings to the members. And all sorts of examples of those. You've also got workers co-ops where you've got a group of people who come together who want to, they all want to do the same business. They all want to run a business, but they want to collaborate together and share that risk between them. So that's where you have a workers co-op is a really good structure for that. And then you've got community benefit societies. So this is it's quite an old legal structure. It's registered with the FCA. You've still got a management committee, you've got officers employed. But the thing I really like about both community benefit societies and cooperatives is the ability to go out and raise finance from members and the general public. So over the years, we've done some really great share offers to raise money for the electric car charging points that I mentioned earlier. We were able to go out and raise quite a significant amount of money for those, which helped us bring in other government funding and has enabled us to go out and win contracts as well. So it's a good way of it's a good way of actually accessing crowdfunding with some quite attractive investment perks for people from the community as well. So we've talked a bit about directors and what people are, what directors have to do. I suppose the general duties are you've got to, behave responsibly, don't do anything stupid, work for the success of the society or the social enterprise. So quite often people have conflicts of interest. So you get involved in something because you're interested in it, but you have to, in a way, give away some of that control to other members of the board. And that can be quite tough to do from an emotional way, because you start something up and you've got a clear vision for it, but you've got to share that vision with the other board members. And occasionally, particularly if you actually want to be involved in the business and generate some income for yourself to pay a mortgage and just to keep, to make the thing work, then you naturally get involved in conflicts of interest with people, and those have to be managed. Tricky, but not impossible, and it just needs everyone to be quite reasonable in that whole process. And I think we're almost there now. I've mentioned a couple of times about reporting to the governing bodies. These are the 3 governing bodies we work with most: Charity Commission, Financial Conduct Authority, and Companies House. So it's about getting reports into them generally once a year, just so they know what's happening. We have some support which is available within the county through the Cumbria Social Enterprise Partnership, and that can generally a couple of days support for someone who's interested, where we talk through what's involved. This is going to be the best legal structure for you. These are the things you need to think about. This is how you can improve your business plan. And a really good resource for that is the Simply Legal document, which is on the Co-ops UK website, which goes through the pros and cons of all the different legal structures. And the way I see it, it's always quite chicken and egg. You can't really decide on your legal structure until you know pretty much what your business is going to do. But you don't really know what your business is going to do until you know your legal structure. So it's taking steps. You move along each bit, you get a clear idea where you're going to get your money from, and then that will inform how you actually develop the social enterprise. So in summary, really hope that people are interested in social enterprise. I found it enormously rewarding to develop my own, but also work with new social enterprises around the county. I spent the whole of yesterday in Barrow speaking to new social entrepreneurs coming through, and it was just amazing to hear the sort of breadth and diversity of ideas that were coming up, and what a positive impact they can deliver there. So we've got loads of interest to support you. If you are more interested in the charity side, I've got Bridget's email there. She's really good at setting those up as well and supporting people on that bit of the journey. So that's all from me. I'm going to throw the floor open now, and hopefully we've got some questions for both myself and Guy.
I'll start then.
Brilliant.
Okay, I work for the BIPC myself in Waltham Forest, and the reason I'm on the webinar is because a few people have asked me about setting up CICs and what the pros and the cons, and working in the community, things like nurseries, childcare, that kind of thing. So I really joined to sort of get a feel for how to answer their questions, and maybe you've got more experience of dealing with that kind of thing.
Yeah, Guy, I'll answer that because I've been speaking for the last 20 minutes.
Fair play. So any insight that you can give me would be really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about nurseries as an example, but whether that's best as a CIC or not. One of the things that a lot of people want to do is they want to be able to earn a living, take a salary from the job that they're passionate about. And they also want to deliver this for social purposes. And they want to remain in control of the new venture. And once you've got those 3 things, then that tends to knock out charities as the best legal structure, because there's a general rule in charities that in charity law that if you control a charity, by which I mean if you're a trustee of a charity, you shouldn't financially benefit from that charity. Now, everything both Daniel and I say today about any law is subject to somebody else saying, aha, yes, but in these circumstances you can, and that's always the case. But the general principle is that charity trustees don't benefit financially from charities. So when people come to us and they say, I want to set up a nursery, but I have a mortgage to pay and I've got kids to feed and stuff. So I need to take a salary from this, and I have to, and I want to maintain control of it. You say, okay, well, at that point, you're not going to be looking at a charity as an option. So the two options, in a way, are a not-for-profit organisation and a for-profit organisation. Now, it's perfectly reasonable, and most people probably do, to set up a nursery as a for-profit organisation. There will be lots and lots of those out there. And one of the things that differs between the two types of company that Daniel was talking about, companies limited by guarantee and companies limited by share, which is by far the most common form of company out there, is companies limited by guarantee aren't owned by anyone. They have directors and directors control them, but nobody owns them. So there's nothing to sell at the end. Whereas if you set up a company limited by share, you own the shares. And after 10 years, you've got 50 nurseries. You can sell them to Nurseries Are Us. I really don't know the nursery world at all. I'm sure there isn't a Nurseries Are Us, but I'm sure there's a Virgin nursery.
There's one just down the road from me, actually.
So if you set up a company limited by guarantee, which can be a community interest company, then that's a way in which you can go in and you can continue to earn, you can earn your salary, because you need to earn a salary.
Yeah.
And some, I mean, Daniel mentioned CHOC, some companies limited by guarantee can pay people very highly indeed. I mean, I think doctors working antisocial hours in rural Cumbria probably earn quite a lot of money per shift, in a way that, I mean, a lot of people would envy. So you can pay decent money, although there are laws on how much you can pay if it's a community interest company, and it has to be reasonable. And then just not get started on what reasonable means. But so, yeah, if essentially, if people want the social side of it, and they want to be able to maintain control, and they want to be able to draw a salary from it, then something like a community interest company is a very good option for them. If they've got, because nurseries can be charities, if they have a group of people who want together, and some of them want to be trustees and some of them want to work as employees, then you could go down the charity route, but the employees need to recognise there that in the end, the trustees have a responsibility to manage that organisation, and they can hire and fire staff, decide to change the organisation, decide to merge it, and so on. So if you've got a passion for it and you want to maintain control and take a salary, charity isn't the best option.
Okay, thank you.
The experience that I had as part of the community shares program, working with a nursery in the north, was they found that people are generally interested in using a nursery when their kids are small, so they know that they've got they've got a real window in their life when it's really important to them to have a good nursery. Depends how many kids they have. If they've got 3 kids, then you could see it spanning a number of years they'd want to be involved in that business. But if they have 1 kid, the kid moves on after maybe 3 years, starts school, and then it's not a burning issue for them anymore. And we found with community shares that it was quite difficult to corral people, because community share offers take a long time to pull together. You're passionate about it early on, but then you can spend 2 years pulling together your business plan, the share offer documents and things like that. And then by the time it's all ready to go and you've raised the money, your kids started school and it's not important for you anymore. And so that's a sort of practical consideration which you don't often think about when it's with these things until you actually get stuck into it and you get involved in all the detail.
Sorry to label the nursery point, but I did meet ladies who ran a nursery locally, and they were looking to set up a second one. And the consideration they had was that the government give you 15 hours of free nursery care, like give parents, and they have a number of places available for parents to take advantage of that, but they don't make a profit out of it. So they wanted to offer a community interest group for for the 15 hours of free government paid care, because they're not making the money out of it. So they thought, well, why don't we open up a separate company which deals with that, and keep the normal limited company that they were running together or partnership together as a separate entity. So just to run the community interest group to offer that free childcare. Is that like a feasible thing, do you think?
It doesn't sound impossible. I know of organisations there's an organisation up in Cumbria who do management consultancy and lots of support for disadvantaged kids, and they charge, I don't know, £1,000 a day for their management consultancy for Shell or BP or whatever, and use the profits from that in order to fund the bits of their enterprise that would not otherwise get. It's because you're not going to charge kids from inner cities quite a lot of money to come to the Lake District and play around in boats, and so they fund one from the other. There's no reason in principle why you couldn't set up two separate companies. There's nothing that stops a director of a for-profit company and also be a director of a not-for-profit company. I think what I would say there, and particularly if they were setting up the not-for-profit one as a charity, they would have to be very careful about conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you'd need to be clear about not putting some of the costs of the for-profit company into the not-for-profit company so you can maximize your profits. So I mean, Daniel mentioned earlier, there's sometimes we often get involved with people who want to do things which are on the margins of the right structure, whether things are taxable or not taxable and what the rules are and so on, because basically anyone who wants to set up something quite straightforward often doesn't need advice to do it. But when they say, actually, but we really want to do that sort of thing, and that's where we would be sitting down with the people you would be talking to and saying, what exactly does this look like? To what extent are you, for example, sharing premises, and how does the money for who's paying the rent, who's paying the energy? What does this look like? So there'd be quite a lot of questions there about exactly what the detail is, and it's fact and degree, my lawyer friends would say. So I was having a conversation last week with some people. I mean, Daniel was talking about trading, talking about grants, and so when there's local authorities involved, you can sometimes get money from a local authority or from the public sector to do pretty much exactly the same thing. And sometimes that money would come in the form of a grant, and sometimes that money would come in the form of a contract. And this is the point where I throw my hands in the air and say, guys, you've got to talk to an accountant about this, because they may be treated differently for tax purposes. But even the conversation I was having last week with an accountant, the accountant was saying, well, actually, I need to see the terms of that. Even though it was called a grant, I need to see the terms of that to see if what they said was a grant is in fact a grant, or whether it's a contract or not. So you do start to get into some quite fine detail there. And that's where we would always recommend that people do speak to an accountant, and sometimes accountants who are specialists as well. Okay. Because the rules that apply to, I mean, we were talking more about community interest companies, but the rules that apply to community interest companies are the rules that apply to all companies. So the tax law, which applies to tax law and company law and so on, applies to community interest companies just as much as any other companies. And when you start to get to the edges of things, to the boundaries of things, that's where you often need to take advice.
The other interesting... Oh, sorry, go on.
Talks both about how rewarding running a social enterprise can be, all the sort of pros, as well as mentioning the disadvantages. But how do you see the role of social enterprises, changing or evolving in the future? Will it keep rising in popularity?
Yeah, I think I talked about how the pandemic made people change their mind about what they wanted to do with their lives. There was the whole Build Back Better thing, and in general there seems to be a shift away from people wanting to just do work which they don't find rewarding, and look for stuff that they actually feel is more interesting. So we always look at certain target groups of people who who we try and work with, who are most likely to start up a social enterprise. And I'd say one of the biggest groups is people who've maybe taken early retirement after the after COVID, either for health reasons, or they just decided that they didn't like their work anymore. And those are the people who have now got time on their hands, who can get involved developing social enterprises. It's a huge issue for particularly for Cumbria, where the workforce is down by about 20,000. So it's really hard to fill vacancies. And social enterprise is one of those things where we can actually get people back into the workforce, to do some of those jobs, but more in a more flexible environment, which is maybe more on their terms, because they see that it's actually doing some wider good for their local community. I was amazed. I was amazed when we went out to recruit recently, the quality of some of the candidates who came forward, because they, we weren't paying a lot of money, but they really connected with our objectives and the cause that we were trying to do around net zero. So that's where social enterprise will continue to grow, because we can attract the talent that some of those conventional businesses can't bring in.
I also think that Daniel and I talk a lot about new startups and kind of necessarily start to talk about small social enterprises, but I wouldn't underestimate how many large and very well established social enterprises there are out there. So every housing association in the country, pretty much, which own, I don't know how many million houses and taking rent off people every week, is a social enterprise. They trade, they charge rent, they do up houses and so on. Every mutual building society is a social enterprise. Their objectives are if you think back to when building societies started, it was about communities coming together to say, can we pool our money so that we can afford to buy houses? Every cooperative society is a social enterprise. Quite a lot of the big charities whose names are sort of public every day, Mind and Mencap and Bernardo's and people like that. If you take that idea of over 50% of your money comes from trading, if you looked at Mind's accounts, the Minds are separate, all local, and so are the Mencaps, but if you look at their accounts, and if they're turning over, I don't know, £1 million, it's probable that £900,000 of that will come in contracts that they are bidding for and getting from the NHS or local authorities in order to deliver things like daycare services or residential services. So there really is a lot of it out there. Social enterprise is quite a new word, so a new phrase, so people don't see it that way. But actually, if you start to look at certainly some of the larger, well-known organisations, they are very socially entrepreneurial.
I think just coming back to the point about the nursery as well, one thing that we've worked on that's been really successful is a couple of gyms which were set up as for-profit businesses, and the founders set off, they went off, bought bits of equipment. They just couldn't make it stack up because it wasn't generating the levels of revenue that they needed to pay the mortgage and feed their kids and pay all the bills. We worked with them to convert them into social enterprises. And since then, because they now have that wider social impact and health impact baked into their organisational structure, they've been able to attract bits of funding from local authorities, the NHS, because they're improving people's health, and it's opened doors to them which just weren't available beforehand. And it's similar to that with nurseries, in that there's a really strong social objective around there, but running them purely as private companies, the government grants don't go far enough. So how can you actually work and be a bit more imaginative? And it's having that option there. A lot of people don't realise it. They spend all that time and effort setting up a business. Converting it into a social enterprise can be a really good way to make it more successful. And if it's struggling, it can actually save its bacon.
That's actually a really useful piece of advice. I've got a client who's looking to set up a gym, and he's going to be struggling to actually get the setup costs. But looking at it from a social enterprise point of view, he can still pay his own wages, can't he? So it's still a feasible business plan. So yeah, that's a really different avenue to think about. So thank you for that. It's really useful.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they've been really successful at getting grants for bits of equipment and things like that.
Yeah.
And I know one gym that we'd worked with quite a lot over the years. They got some new directors in, and they weren't particularly that they didn't have the best interests of the organisation at heart. They thought they'd be able to take it over and run it as a private business, but the asset lock stopped them from doing that. And it meant that it stayed as a social enterprise. So it proves that the whole model actually works and those protections actually do exist.
Brilliant. When are you going to be releasing the YouTube of this? Because I'm going to send a link over to one or two people.
Yeah, it happens within a few days.
Okay.
Just with the schedule this week, it'll probably be into next week. We can definitely let you know. Maybe send you a message ahead of that.
That'd be great.
But next week, yeah, we have everything up to date that we've run before, but this will be probably on next week.
Okay, Sophie, thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Guy or Daniel? Okay, just checking the chat. Definitely a very informative session, both of you. So thank you very, very much for that. It's business with a conscience, isn't it? And a social cause. And very thought-provoking session. Did you have any other slides or any other discussion points you wanted to lead on?
No, I think we've covered everything. I mean, the main point is there is that you know, there is support within the county from Social Enterprise Cumbria, and you know, for Stephen down in down in Southeast, down in Waltham Forest. There's also things like Social Enterprise UK, Social Enterprise London. So there's quite often local social enterprise networks which can offer similar sorts of support.
Brilliant. Yeah, and sorry, you can't do the this afternoon's meeting as well. I booked into that one too.
Yes, that it's just postponed, not cancelled. Just needs to be rescheduled at a later date. Again, we'll let you know on that. No problem.
All right, brilliant. Thanks very much, guys. Really, really useful. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll just pop in our contact details as well, just because we have a BIPC centre both in Carlisle and in Barrow libraries, and it's a good starting point for, because we have now the knowledge of the Cumbria Social Enterprise Partnership. So if we do get inquiries in and after basic information they're still needing extra support, I know where the experts are. So thank you.
Cheers, guys. See you all later.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye
you
then.
very much.
Bye.
Thank you very
Cheers, see you
much.
all.